Today, we release this report to Congress and the White House, and quite frankly, we are hopeful, and I urge the leaders in Washington and across the Gulf Coast to take actions based upon these recommendations.
This is the first time that these 5 states have ever come together and produced a report that represents a collaboration and represents the thinking of citizens who are actually living on the coast in all of these states. We hope it's going to provide an impetus for the congressional delegations of these states to come together and make the case for the entire Gulf Coast.
This is not our coast to save alone. This is a national tragedy, a culture that is being lost. And I can say I am not going to be part of the generation that loses it.
We have in Louisiana a very good master plan. We have revenue sharing. After talking about it for 50 years, we have that in federal law, and now most recently we have a big jumpstart with the Restore Act, which we passed recently.
There's lots of good ideas that die because they're not convenient to be considered. There's not a coalition to support them. Ultimately, it'll come back to these 5 states banding together to push this good idea, which frankly I think is good not just for the Gulf Coast states, but good for the entire nation.
We're really talking about being proactive instead of reactive. The coastal communities, and it was interesting depending on where you were, they were allowed to assess their own values and come up with their own plans of action. You have to gauge the fact that this is an overarching, overall collective effort by what were maybe at one time 5 states that are trying to be 5 states now. And they're trying to figure out a way to make it happen.
You know, we have to ask ourselves the question, are we going to be the generation that sat by and watched the loss of communities, of culture, human, plant, marine, and animal life? I think not. The report in your hands is surely the roadmap that we can use to make sure that this does not happen on our watch.
I ask you to please read the report. It has some valuable information because what Texas does affects Mississippi. What Mississippi does affects Louisiana. It's a Gulf regional perspective. Really, these blue ribbon forums, I don't think we would be the region we are today, and we need the additional help from the federal side. I hope you read the report and take all the information. What we have on there is something that is really special for our region so we don't lose it.
The Blue Ribbon Resilient Communities Initiative and the report that it produced certainly raises serious concerns about the future of one of the nation's, and indeed the world's, most productive regions. Critical navigation, commodity transportation, seafood, and recreation assets are found along the Gulf Coast like nowhere else in America. The recommendations outlined in this report represent a bright light that lends hope to the idea of long-term Gulf Coast sustainability.
The way this process went forward, the America's Wetlands went out into the communities and asked for grassroots information. The communities are the people who know what's going to be impacted and what needs to be saved, and who can talk about the culture and who can talk about the business that exists and the business opportunities.
I think that the partnership that has come about between the Gulf Coast states from this report and from efforts such as the Restore Act, building that partnership is going to be vital in convincing the nation that this is a national investment of which the entire nation will benefit. It's not just for the coast.